Well, good morning and welcome to Elevenses once again. Slight problem with the sound there. I had the sound output connected to the Bluetooth speaker. I completely forgot about it. That was for Christmas songs, over Christmas lunch. Well, good morning. We're on show number 98. I'm still setting the screen up here, which is why I'm in a bit of a small muddle, but here we go, we're nearly there. So what do we got for you today on Elevenses 99? It's Sunday the 27th of December, 2 days after Christmas. We've got a little bit of an explanation about the COVID rules because they still seem to need explaining to some people. Yamaha have recalled some motorcycles for a rather unlikely fault. KYMCO have announced that their 127-mile-per-hour electric motorcycle will be built in Italy. MAG are working with Transport for London to review accident black spots, and I will saying that that involvement is to be applauded, but I will ask whether there will be a positive outcome at the end of the show. So grab yourself your brew, sit yourself down, and don't forget you can join me, Kevin Williams, here with my Elevenses show every Sunday and every Wednesday at 11. We'll be looking at topical news, controversial views, and some better biking tips from time to time. So, okay, don't forget, if you have a question or a comment, any kind of feedback, anything you'd like me to look at, I'm more than happy to oblige. I'll answer questions and things at the end of the show. Right, okay, so let's crack on then. We're in it's the second to last Elevenses of 2020, so let me first wish you a Merry Christmas. Hope you had a good one and a good Boxing Day yesterday, or at least as good as you can in the circumstances. And so commiserations to all of you who are joining us in Tier 4. If that means you're furloughed again, you can always join me here. Keep you busy with half an hour's chit-chat about motorcycles. Having said all that, of course, you'd think that by now that riders would actually know the rules on group riding, but there still seems to be some confusion about what you can and can't do in Tier 4. As late as Christmas Eve, one rider was asking on one of my Facebook groups where he could find details of the traditional Christmas morning ride. Now, I'm not sure Facebook is actually old enough for rides organised on there to count as traditional, but we'll let that slide. But he was told in no uncertain terms that group riding wasn't allowed, and he seemed very surprised by that. And there was a bit of a frustrated exchange as he was reminded of the no ride-out rules that operate in Tier 4. Now, as it happens, I tracked down a legal opinion on what you can and what you can't do under Tier 4, and here is the link if you want to read the full article. That's the wrong, that didn't go right. Let's delete that again. Try again. So here's the link. It's to the White Dalton Motorcycling Lawyers webpage. Sarah has just asked, what are the rules regarding CBT and bike tests? Okay, let's get that out of the way first, Sarah. It entirely depends on where you live. If you're in Tier 4, if you're in Wales, if you are in mainland Scotland, I think, they are all suspended. All bike training is suspended. So I'm afraid CBTs are locked down too. Now, I appreciate that is causing a huge amount of problem to people whose CBTs are expiring during lockdown. And I talked about this back in April and May on numerous occasions, asking why CBTs weren't getting the same kind of extension that an MOT would, for example. Good question. Nobody has answered that. The rules are the rules. The guidance from the DVSA is somewhat ambiguous, in as much as it says should rather than must. There has been some legal toing and froing between training schools and the DVSA under the previous lockdown rules in November about precisely what should and should not mean in real legal terms. And some schools, I know, decided to go ahead with running one-to-one CBTs. So all I can suggest to you, if you are looking to do a CBT, is that you have a phone around or have a sort of Google around and see which bike schools are actually still offering CBTs. If you happen to be outside Tier 4, the rules are slightly different. I can't remember what they are in Tier 3 at the moment. I can look that up and I will get back to you later on that, Sarah. So I hope that kind of answers your question. But basically, bike tests are also locked down. So it's a real problem for us here in Tier 4 if we happen to be bike instructors. Good morning, Nigel. Thank you. Yes, I didn't have a God Christmas, but I did have a reasonably good one. Right. Okay. So I've just put the link up for the group ride out thing. And I'll just quote very quickly from that link. As I said, there does seem to be some confusion about whether group rides are allowed in Tier 4, but the White Dalton opinion is that they are not. He says, whilst there's an exemption in Tier 4 areas for outdoor recreation, and a motorcycle is undoubtedly outdoor recreation, who you can ride with becomes a lot more restrictive. You can ride with one person who is not in your household, but if you, for example, have your partner on the pillion, you cannot ride with another individual. And he goes on to say that notwithstanding there is a social distance between the bikes, you will still be riding, in my opinion, with another if you ride even in a loose group. And he says, I could certainly raise an argument that merely riding in the approximate presence of somebody you know does not constitute a group, but were I prosecuting, I could more convincingly argue that riding in a group bears its ordinary meaning, and these emergency rules need to be interpreted so they fulfill their purpose. To put it bluntly, he says you'd be unwise in riding more than a pair. And what if you happen to be the one putting a ride of 3 people together? He says, well, organise a ride of more than 2 people and you could be deemed an event organiser, and you leave yourself open to a massive fine. And we've seen that with organised house parties, I believe £3,000 for a first offence. So the article concludes by advising that if you do go riding, keep it local as well. Don't forget, you're not supposed to leave Tier 4. Right, okay, Sarah, I'll get back to you on that. You're saying your CBT runs out. I'll get back to you later as best I can on that one. Right, okay, so where are we? Yes, all right, now on to the next story then. I had to check the date when I read this. Yamaha are recalling a range of bikes. It's the NMAX 125, the XMAX 125, the XMAX 300, 400, YZF-R3, MT-03, XSR 700, Tracer 700, or Tenere 700, because they, wait for it, have a non-functioning rear reflector. I thought this was April Fool, personally. How on earth can you make a retro reflector that does not reflect? It's like selling a mirror that is, basically doesn't work. But that's the recall. Whatever is fitted to the back of these bikes does not, to quote the recall, properly reflect the light coming from behind the vehicle. And as a result, Yamaha say the vehicle would not be sufficiently visible for the following traffic, increasing the risk of an accident. So there you have it, a non-reflective reflector, just in time for New Year. Right, okay, let's have a quick look at the next item that I have for you. This rather splendid looking motorcycle is a KYMCO. Now, KYMCO aren't known for their motorcycles, at least not in the bigger classes. They have actually managed to avoid building big motorcycles up to this point. They're mostly known for small and in some ways they've got a bit of a reputation as being a bit cheap electric scooters. But have a look at that. I mean, I think that's pretty damn attractive, apart from the obligatory sawn-off passenger seat, which I personally wouldn't want to sit on. And I wouldn't want to sit anybody on it while I'm riding it. But realistically, the only thing that gives away the fact that that is an electric motorcycle is the lack of an exhaust can poking out the back of it. But that particular machine was revealed at the Milan Motorcycle Show last year. It has had a few changes since then. The Brembo brakes that were shown on it at the time have been replaced by KYMCO branded brakes. But it's due to go to manufacture next year in Italy. Why Italy when KYMCO are a brand from the East? Well, the answer to that is Italy allows access to other countries in Europe. And that is the main target market, as the KYMCO chairman, Alan Coe, explained at a press conference last month. He said not only will transportation costs be much lower, but it will be built in the EU. And that means that the company will face fewer problems, specifically in terms of the motorcycle batteries, which are regulated with strict safety requirements. And at least as importantly, I suspect, a Made in Italy tag will also increase brand acceptance, since, as I say, many still see KYMCO as a bit of a budget brand. But there is one big difference with this particular motorcycle, which may appeal to the traditional bike rider and help the electric machine start to cross over into mainstream acceptance. And that is that it has a 6-speed gearbox. Acceleration is decently rapid. It reaches 100 kilometers per hour, which is 62 miles per hour in 3.9 seconds. And it'll reach the top speed of 205 kph, which is 127 miles per hour in 11.8 seconds. So that's the KYMCO, it's the Revonex, and that's due to go on sale at some point next year. So that's something to look forward to. So I'll be quite happy to get a test ride on that and find out a little bit more about how it performs with its 6-speed gearbox. Right, okay. So what else is new? Well, MAG has been working with TfL, and this is a good bit of news again. It's always good to see the interaction between one of our rider groups and the kind of the people who are actually responsible for the roads. And basically what they have arranged is to review threats, as they call it, to rider safety. The Transport for London, TfL, will carry out a series of site visits at critical points across London that MAG say are threatening riders' safety. And they point to motorcycle fatalities in London having risen by 40% plus over the last 2 years, from 22 in 2018 to 31 last year. Now, I will point out that the law of small numbers applies here, where you can show something like a big 40% jump like that, and it really isn't a great increase in absolute numbers. Now, obviously, every fatality is a huge tragedy for everybody concerned with it, but 22 to 31, that's an increase of 9. Now, what you actually need to do is look at a much longer timeline and actually figure out how fatalities are changing over a period of years. You really need to look at this in terms of a decade at least. They say that provisional figures for 2020 show no decline despite what they call vastly reduced traffic levels during the pandemic. And MAG's argument is that poor road design is partly to blame. And Heidi Alexander, who's Deputy Mayor for Transport, agreed a series of site meetings with MAG. And basically, TfL will meet with riders at locations which are typical of the black spots that they say are found around the capital, including Hyde Park Corner, Farringdon Road, and Old Street. MAG's finalising the schedules, and visits will go ahead as soon as possible. Lembit Opik, who's MAG's Director of Communications, has said this is a significant step forward. Until now, riders in London have felt disenfranchised. Their view is as valid as any other road users. We can discuss statistics while sat in meeting rooms for as long as we like, but it's the lived experience of the user that was being forgotten. We believe riders' interests have been neglected, and the high number of deaths is the outcome of that neglect, something we can now address. Compared to the millions poured into cycle safety, it's hard to find any evidence of equivalent investment in the safety of motorcyclists. And to be honest, I concur with that statement about where the money is being spent. Greater London Authority Assembly member and Conservative Transport spokesman Keith Prince chaired the meeting and observed that this meeting led to actual agreements so that motorcyclists are treated with parity of esteem by the London authorities. I'm pleased we've made this concrete agreement for sensible engagement that's data-driven and time-efficient. So at last, riders are included in London transport discussions on an equitable basis. Colin Brown, who you may recall I had on the show a couple of months ago, he's the Director of Campaign and Political Engagement for MAG, said, "We plan to set a precedent for real progress in London, and this will become a template for action across the country. All local authorities can and should appoint dedicated motorcycling officers. These officers, like cycling officers, should be charged with making motorcycling safer and more accessible. They should be accountable to motorcyclists." Okay, deep breath. During the meeting, MAG called on TfL to carry out detailed assessments of recent road schemes, such as the pop-up cycle lanes and the low traffic neighbourhoods, which MAG are saying impact on rider safety. And they're also asking TfL to use its influence to improve conditions for gig economy riders. Well, that's another question altogether, and perhaps one I'll look at on another show. But anyway, Colin concluded, "We view this meeting as a further step in an ongoing process of dialogue. It's certainly not the end of our efforts, and we hope to make further progress on these other important points we are calling for in the coming months. Success in London will naturally lead to progress for all bikers throughout the country." So yes, I tend to agree with that, although, you know, I hate to be a bit London-centric with the show. I do live in London. These activities do impact me pretty directly, but what happens in the city tends to spread out to the rest of the country. Now, okay, what do I think about all this? Because as you probably guessed, I do have an opinion. Well, here it is. It just happened to be a complete coincidence. And as I was digesting this news from MAG, that they will be working with TfL to identify and hopefully improve these accident black spots for powered two-wheelers, I just happened to be putting up an article on my Coffee archive page from Facebook, which I wrote in December 2016. So almost 4 years to the day that this new MAG press release appeared. The 2016 article referred to a then new study into bike crashes, which had been carried out by TfL and again referred to London. And it concluded that bike crashes were most likely to happen at junctions. The press release from TfL concluded with news of an action plan to improve junctions for bikers. And this action plan then was basically set forth in what was called the Urban Motorcycle Design Handbook, which, if I recall correctly, was published early in 2017. I duly got hold of a copy, I read it, and thought it was mostly pretty good stuff. So let's fast forward 4 years to today. Where are we now? Well, the latest press release from MAG that I've just basically read out to you said that the TfL's excellent handbook offers potentially life-saving road design changes. But it asks, reasonably enough, where these have been implemented, and that's a very good question, because on the ground, there's very little evidence that TfL's actually followed any of its own recommendations. But the bigger problem in London generally is that TfL have little or no influence over the bigger picture in London. London is composed of 33 separate authorities, the boroughs, and there's no need for them to adhere to TfL's road design guide. as Mag pointed out in the press release, something needs to be done to harmonise the confusing pattern of bus lane usage by motorcyclists. This is a classic example of how London's road design is scattered over dozens of different authorities. You can be riding down a bus lane, which is under TfL administration and therefore allowing P2W access to that bus lane, into a stretch of road which is actually under local authority control. And that local authority may not allow bikes in bus lanes, in which case you have to spot the road sign and move out of the bus lane into the main flow of traffic. And then only a few hundred meters later, you'll find that that road is back under TfL control and you can use the bus lane again. Now, of course, many motorcyclists actually get caught out by changes like that. It's confusing enough that whenever you look at a bus lane and you think, can I get into that, you actually have to read the sign. You can't just automatically assume that you get access, and that does catch people out who think that you can use any bus lane in London. If you happen to live outside the capital, it does catch people out. Now, so 4 years ago, that handbook on improving road design looked like a big step forward. But as I say, what has happened? 4 years ago, the other riders' rights organisation, the BMF, reviewed that action plan, and rather amazingly, they wrote in their online blog, "We don't understand motorcycle accidents." Well, I think we do, and we just have to accept that the facts are out there. Now, Lembit Opik, he said, "We can discuss statistics sat in meeting rooms for as long as we like, but it's the lived experience of the user that was being forgotten." He's right and he's wrong, because statistics are what gives us facts. Sadly, the lived experience is usually based on opinion, which can be inaccurate and unhelpful, and even prejudice, which sends us down completely blind avenues, so to speak. Motorcyclists continue to blame drivers for collisions at junctions, whilst the fact we don't want to face is that these crashes are collisions, and two people are involved in a collision. If one road user, and yes, it is frequently the driver who sets up the crash, the other road user, the rider, still has to ride into that crash to make it a fact. Now, it was no coincidence that my riding school was called Survival Skills all the way back in 1997. It was basically named after the self-preservation techniques I myself learned as a courier. I learned them the hard way. I spent 16 years, much of it on these very streets in London that we're talking about today, but all over the south of England generally, and even further afield from time to time. I spent those 16 years mostly staying out of trouble. I learnt a lot about collision avoidance and evasion. So those were facts in 1997. Now, it's also no coincidence that the very first column I wrote for the magazine, which was called Slipstream back then, was actually called Accident-Prone Riders. And it was written in response to an editorial by Ian Much, the previous issue, who had written about these accident-prone riders who are forever falling victim to blind car drivers. I wrote, "It's easy to point the finger of blame at car drivers, but it's worth remembering it takes two to tangle. One vehicle operator to make the initial mistake, but the second, all too often the rider, to sail blindly into the trap." So that was the facts in 2002. It's no coincidence either that I've spent the last 9 years delivering the Science of Being Seen presentation, and that goes out to biker down audiences directly down in Folkestone, in Rochester, when I'm delivering down there. It goes out to many biker down audiences in the wider scheme of things across the UK. I've delivered it personally to clubs and groups across the south of England. I have delivered it online. I have even gone out to New Zealand and worked for the New Zealand Transport Agency on their multi-venue Shiny Side Up tours in 2018 and 2019, delivering Science of Being Seen out there. And I've been delivering that since 2012. Now, look at the accident stats themselves. If we look at the research into motorcycle crashes, they began sometime back in the late 60s. Those research papers are there. They're there to be read. They're there to be looked at. So those were the facts in the late 1960s. And all these facts remain facts today. The statistics show that we are having exactly the same crashes as our grandparents did when they were riding motorbikes. Yet we're still making the same mistake. All too often, it's the motorcyclist who is relying on other road users to get it right and to keep us out of trouble. And when other drivers, other road users do inevitably get it wrong, after all, we're all human, we all make mistakes, we're all fallible. Riders continue to be taken by surprise. The fact is that there are very few junction collisions which are totally unavoidable. There are one or two, yes, it does happen that sometimes you simply cannot find a way out of trouble that somebody else has put you into. But in many cases, the rider simply sailed into a crash that they could have foreseen had they been aware it would happen. We don't teach riders to think about things going wrong. We simply do not cover that in bike training generally, at basic level or at advanced level. But in many cases, the riders turn out not to be able to take evasive action either. We can't swerve effectively, we can't brake effectively in an emergency. And there are reasons for that based on surprise. When we're surprised, we don't do what we've been taught to do. So all that work we do on CBT and getting riders to do emergency stops, all that work we do on the off-road module of the bike test in getting riders to dodge around cones, it goes out the window in genuine emergencies. So by all means, address the roads as a problem, re-engineer junctions, by all means campaign to raise rider awareness amongst drivers. They all have a role to play. But for heaven's sake, we must never forget that it's me, it's you that holds the final trump card. We just have to remember that we first of all have it in our own hands, our own destiny, but we also have to know how to play that card to get out of trouble. Right, okay, so after that, a little bit of a rant there. That's it from today. We'll be back with the next show on Wednesday the 30th. So just a quick reminder, while we're all shut down, I am still delivering online coaching sessions. I put a lot of work into developing some relevant online sessions for you, covering everything from twisty road riding to city centre commuting. And the bit that I've made really fundamentals to these courses is they're not simply theory. It's easy enough to deliver theory online. I can do that to pretty much for anyone. But I also use that time to show you that some genuinely easy and useful practical exercises that you can take out and practice on the road to learn to practice what you've just learned online. So, okay, that'll do for today. Don't forget, if you have missed any of the previous shows, you can catch them either here over on my YouTube channel, which is Survival Skills UK, or you can find them on my coffee.com survival skills page. That's it for today. I'll be back with the next show on Wednesday, which will be the last one of the year. So thanks everybody for looking in. We've had a couple of other people say hello. Jack said hello. Nigel's there, of course. Tony Surridge and Nick and Paul are all saying good morning. So hello everybody, and thank you for looking in. That's it for today, and I'll see you again in a few days' time. Bye for now.